Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and we're here for another mock draft. This was not something we were planning to do this early in the season, right? We're thinking this is going to be a big year for Jacksonville. Obviously, things have gone south, and it means we're gonna change our focus a little bit, right? So we're gonna talk about this upcoming draft class. We're gonna talk specifically today about the situation Jacksonville's in, where they stand, where I think they'll be around the end of the season, kind of go through the schedule, and then what do they really do from there? Is this a team that's coming into the draft saying we need to fill these three holes and we got to get these positions, or are we stripping this thing down to the studs and just rebuilding with the best players you can get? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about which players to watch and just kind of where things stand right now. But this will only be 3 rounds. I'm not going to go into 4 and 5 because, honestly, what ends up happening is you get a lot of players that end up falling like 2 rounds too far, or just completely out of position. And so I want to keep it somewhat realistic, but this is mainly to talk about just kind of their situation and what players they should be watching. So with that all said, we're going to talk about where the Jaguars stand right now. So looking at their schedule, 2-6 after the Packers game. You got 9 games remaining. What's really interesting about Jacksonville's schedule is that you get very difficult games for the next 4 weeks. And then all of a sudden after that, you've got 5 games that are winnable, right? You play the Titans twice. You're going to play the Jets. You're going to host them. You're going to go into Las Vegas, where you're going to play Gardner Minshew, most likely, who has not had much luck playing against Jacksonville. And then you're going to face the Colts in Week 18. So it's a situation where it's really a question to me of, are the Jaguars still a functioning football team at the end of the season? And I don't think that'll be the case. And what I mean by that is I think that the head coach will be fired. I think that it'll be very clearly a team that's focusing on the future, that's not going to be fighting as hard as they might be, now or in weeks previous, because there's just not going to be anything left. The situation they're in, look, you can't lose 9 games and make the playoffs unless you're in a very bad division. And that's not the case for Jacksonville, right? I mean, with the Houston Texans, because they're the clear team that's at the top of the division right now, and the Colts are still around there, obviously, but the Texans have swept them at this point. Well, they aren't really maybe as good as their record at times. It doesn't really matter, right? They've already won a bunch of games. They're already in a really good situation. We take a look at the standings right now. They're 6-2, right? They're 3 games away from being locked ahead of Jacksonville if the Jaguars can't reach a winning record. So that's kind of out the window, right? I'm not saying anything that you don't know already with that. But in these difficult games against the Eagles, the Vikings, the Lions, and the Texans, you have to go 2-2. You can't do any less, because if you don't get to that 4-8 record, you don't have a chance of making the playoffs. You would need a complete miracle that would really be out of your control and just be dumb luck at the end of the day. So do I think they're going to come out of those games at least 2-2 and then run the table at the end of the season? I personally don't. My honest prediction, I think Doug Peterson gets fired next week after the Philadelphia game. I think they dropped to 2-7. I think things are clearly over at that point. Maybe they wait longer to fire him. That's the one thing that's kind of hard to predict. But that would be my bet, is after the Philadelphia game. I think against teams like the Vikings, the Lions, the Texans, I just don't think they're going to have anything for him. I think they drop to 2-10 and then come close to, evening out at the end of the season, winning maybe 2 or 3 of the last 5. So my prediction, I think they're 4-13. And with them being 2-6 right now, that's very much par for the course for what they've already done. So the question of where I think they're going to be picking, I do think it will be around the top 5. And ultimately, it's going to be interesting to see if that pick has any value to other teams, right? Because maybe there's a team that wants to move up for a quarterback, but it's not really a class that you're saying, like, no matter what, this guy is going first overall, and then this quarterback has to go number 2, and then this guy at 3. We don't have that this year, right? there's absolutely a likelihood that one of these quarterbacks goes first overall, but we don't know who. There's no one who has solidified themselves as undoubtedly the first overall pick. Doesn't mean there's nothing to work with there. That's just the situation. Things are pretty fluid right now. So for Jacksonville, looking at the board here and who's where, I think that teams like the Raiders, maybe the Saints, end up losing more games than Jacksonville. I could see them perhaps jumping them. The rest of these teams, I think they stay behind them. I think 7 is probably the floor for this team unless they really figure things out. And then as far as the teams ahead, I think maybe the Jets get more wins just because they have to go all in this year. Even if it's a disaster, like, you can't back out of this season. You've invested so many resources. You've been playing for this forever. You can't start selling pieces right now and go into a rebuild with Aaron Rodgers because he's just going to say F you and retire. That's probably what's going to happen. So not really a choice for them. So I think probably around 5 to 7 is where Jacksonville sits. Maybe as high as 4, but that's about where they're going to be. Now, where I'm at as far as what player to target, I think that pretty clearly right now, if you just want to nail your draft pick and you want to make sure you get a guy that's going to be phenomenal for a long time and you don't want to take a risk, take Travis Hunter, right? It's a simple pick. You're going to get a guy who's probably going to play both sides of the ball for a while. He's been logging 130, 140 snaps in college in each game. I mean, it's ridiculous what he's able to do. And what he shows on both sides of the ball is truly elite, right? This is nothing new if you watch Travis Hunter, right? And you'll even see, like, my comparison for him, and I'm not saying that he goes completely to this level. This is talking mainly about who they are as prospects. When I'm just looking at the offensive side of the ball, I see a good amount of Justin Jefferson to the way Hunter plays because he's got that long frame. He's a little bit leaner than Jefferson, but he has these ridiculous contested catch ability, this ability to just bring down the ball in difficult situations, be able to catch it consistently, good hands, and he's going to be a good route runner, right? And as good as Justin Jefferson is right now, we got to remember that this guy went like 22nd in the draft. He was not a first overall pick or anything in that regard. So Travis Hunter, he's my top guy. I think other guys you're looking at, I think Abdul Carter and Will Johnson are the other obvious ones. Now, Carter is going to be interesting because to me, I'm a lot higher on him for Jacksonville than most other people are going to be. The reason why is because I'm not looking at it like, well, you already got 2 edge rushers. Why would you spend a first-round pick on another one? Guys rotate. Every team does that, right? And Abdul Carter is someone who can play linebacker a little bit. You can move him around. You can have him do different things. Trayvon Walker, well, you don't want to move him inside a ton. I think you can do that a little bit, and you can get these guys on the field. If you're running a 3-4 scheme, if you go to that a little bit, that's another opportunity to get all these guys on the field. Having Carter maybe be the stand-up guy, well, Trayvon Walker plays defensive end. Point is, there's ways that you get creative to get Carter on the field, and I think that what he provides and the kind of player he's going to be, which I'm going to say I am very confident right now that he is going to be an elite all-pro type of player in the NFL. That's where I'm at on it. And I mean it when I have this Micah Parsons comp for him. I think he's going to be phenomenal. And so am I going to look at it if he's on the board and he's my best player and say, no, I can't take you because I've already got some good players there? No, I'm picking him. I'm taking him if he's there. That's just how I feel. Don't expect everyone to agree, but that's my opinion on it, and you're at least going to hear it this one time and probably a little bit in the offseason too before he ends up going before the Jaguars pick anyway. Now, Will Johnson, if you just want to get a damn good cornerback, that's what you're getting in Will Johnson, right? Just a guy that came into this year about as refined as it gets, everything you asked for. The only question of me was really run defense. Like, I didn't think he was incredible in that regard, but he's still done pretty well in it, right? And then you get into some other names where maybe these aren't positions you can target. With Ashton Genty, as incredible of a player he is, I think he's someone that doesn't really make a ton of sense for Jacksonville just because you got Tank Bigsby here. And, I mean, I'm not saying, let me get this right. If you're going to get Ashton Genty, I think you got to get him on a team that doesn't have a running back room, right? I'm talking about Cowboys, teams like that just need a complete overhaul of their running back room. Well, we have questions about Travis Etienne. Well, he might be traded by the time you watch this video. We still have Tank Bigsby here. We still have a solid run game. I think it makes more sense for Jacksonville to just make sure they have that guy that can be the pass catcher, that can be the speed threat. That's what they're kind of missing with Etienne missing time, and especially if he gets traded. So Genty may not make a ton of sense. Tetairoa McMillan, you could make this move. You could draft him and say, we'll wait a year on Gabe Davis. Maybe you even move Brian Thomas Jr. into the slot a little bit, have McMillan play inside a little bit just to get these guys on the field, because you won't really have a slot if you got McMillan and you're putting him on with Davis and Thomas, assuming Kirk would be gone. I don't think you would have that many receivers. And with Davis, by the way, why I'm saying this is because he's guaranteed through next year. So you don't have an option. You'd have to trade him, and I don't think there's the market there for that to happen. So that's kind of what you got to do to get McMillan. So I'm not really huge on that. And I think I like other players more for Jacksonville. I think you kind of get into some of these names. If you're not picking top 5, if you're maybe further down the board, this defensive line, while they've added a lot of people on the interior, if Mason Graham's the best player there, I don't think that's a bad pick at all. And then you get into guys that I'm a huge fan of, Josh Simmons being one of those. This pro comp, I'm going to update because I don't think that's exactly where I'm at on him. I think he's more like Christian Darrisaw in the way he plays, because what Simmons does in the run game and how he impacts that level of the game is completely different than Harrison. So Simmons is someone that you're going to hear a lot of from me. I'm a huge fan of him. I think he's a phenomenal player. The issue is obviously he got hurt this year. He's out for the season. How does that impact his draft stock? I'll say this. If I had to spend a top half pick in the first round on him, or even a top 10 pick, I would be there on it. I think he's that good of a player. I think it's just a matter of him recovering from that injury and making sure nothing terrible has come of it. Now, I could talk about all these other guys. We've spent a lot of time on players, and you can kind of see where I have people. But these are mainly the people we're discussing for the first round, unless you move really far down the board. So, with that all said, we're going to jump into this. We're not going to trade, not going to do any of that until we get to maybe the bye week, or more likely this off season, because we're really just talking about prospects at this point, trying to introduce you guys to these names and just our thoughts on them. So our picks here, we have 5, 37, 69, and then we have 90 from the Minnesota Vikings. We also have 127 from the Minnesota Vikings. The rest of this is just our standard picks that we have for the year. So we'll start this off. You get one quarterback off the board. Tetairoa McMillan goes. Travis Hunter and Mason Graham. So we'll look at needs here. We'll talk about what this team does need. And this is not going to necessarily decide what we're going to do, because at the end of the day, if a player is clearly more talented, I'm probably going to go with them. But we are going to at least pay some consideration to this. So on the offense, I think needs you're talking about, I'm going to assume Travis Etienne is gone. I think that's probably what's going to happen within the week. If he isn't, disregard this. But I think you need another running back on this team. I don't think you need a first-round pick in it, but you want to get that speed threat. You want to get that guy who's going to be able to impact the receiving game and be a threat in open space, which is what Etienne does for this team. But unfortunately, we don't really get him in those situations often enough. And as a rusher, we don't really use him that well. He doesn't really fit what Jacksonville does because he needs lanes to open. He needs to have space. And this is not a team that's getting space for running backs all that often, other than successful screenplays once in a while. We're not talking about quarterback, obviously. Wide receiver, the only thing we can really talk about here is if Christian Kirk's gone. I don't think the Jaguars would make another big investment there, although I would not be mad if they went out and got Emeka Egbuka, a player like that, right? But Parker Washington will probably be the guy if Kirk doesn't return on some sort of renegotiated deal, which I would be all for. Tight end, Evan Ingram, I think is going to stay. Even if somehow he was gone, Brennan Strange has played pretty well this year. And I think you'd have to give him a shot as a starter. And the rest of that room, you're not really putting high picks in unless you just have an incredible value. Now, offensive line. To me, there's two guys here that are safe. That's Ezra Cleveland and Anton Harrison. That doesn't necessarily mean that the Jaguars can't bring back any of these players. Like Mitch Morse, for example, he has another year. And part of that year is guaranteed with the Jaguars. But I believe it's about $4 million of that contract that isn't guaranteed. So you can ask yourself, is he going to be worth that next year? And I think there will be a fair discussion to be had, but Mitch will probably stick around realistically. We'll probably be looking at right guard. We'll be looking at left tackle. So, if they don't bring someone back, this is going to be a big need. And even if they did, even if they got like a 1-year deal, because I don't think they're going to go spend a ton in free agency, I would be fine still drafting a guy. And I think there's going to be some great opportunities to do that in this class. So that's kind of our offensive look. On the defense, I've said this before, and don't let some of the stuff trick you with Eric Armstead listed as a defensive end. It is Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines out. That's all they got on the edge. They don't have a whole lot else. Miles Cole, Yasir Abdullah, players like that. They're rotational at best. They're not players that you're necessarily saying right now until they prove it that you can't go out and replace. You can't go out and upgrade. So I think the edge is an area where you can add in another player. I already had that conversation, obviously, talking about Abdul Carter. So you've heard my thoughts on that. The interior, you got Eric Armstead, you got Devon Hamilton, you've got other young players there. Isezi Otamuwo, I probably said that wrong, but he's been really good for Jacksonville. The linebacker room, phenomenal. The only player I would even consider adding there is if Jay Higgins falls in this draft. He'll be a guy that I'll advocate for if that happens, but still, it's a loaded room. That would just be a value pick. The cornerback room is an area where they can add. You've got Tyson Campbell locked down. You're going to need another guy on the outside. I think Jarion Jones is ideally going to be a really good slot corner. I think that was a really good pick by this team. But you want another outside guy. And then you look at safety. You do got Darnell Savage. I think he's probably going to play back there. He kind of has to at this point because otherwise you're forcing Jones outside in that case. And Antonio Johnson really just hasn't done enough at this point to earn the starting job or to more so retain it. So you're probably looking at add a safety unless they decide we're going to bring back Andre Sisco, which I'd be all for it if they did, but it's not been a great year for him. So those are our needs here. Looking back at the board, what we have gone, we've got Milrow, we have McMillan, we have Travis Hunter, and Mason Graham. Really, the only player of those four that I would be devastated over is Travis Hunter. But that's expected, right? We're picking 5th overall. If he fell a 5, you're doing jumping jacks after that, or backflips, or something to celebrate. But with my board here, Abdul Carter is my next guy. But you have Will Johnson too. These are two players that, for me, are very close. I think some of this comes down to just, for me, it being more of an emphasis to be great in the trenches, to have an impact there. And also considering contract value. Because I kind of look at it in a sense to, what is my rookie performing worth? How much am I paying him on the rookie contract? How much value am I stealing? Right? So if I think both these players are great, and the top of the corner market earns $25 million, well, edge is almost $35 million. If that were the case, if both these players are performing near the top, then Abdul Carter has more value. So that would make more sense for me, but I know I took him in the other one, and I know cornerback is obviously seemed like a bigger issue for this team. So maybe it's safer to take Will Johnson, not only because of that, because he is he's a player who's more experienced at his position. He didn't just move there this year like Abdul Carter did, going from linebacker to edge. And, he's just played at a high level here for a while, right? And there's that run defense grade I was talking about that's gotten better. So just to have things be a little bit different here and not to force the Abdul Carter first round pick thing on you guys every week, Will Johnson's going to be our guy here. I think it's a fine pick. Like I said, we're not trading. If we were, maybe we consider moving back, or maybe we consider moving up here and trying to get Josh Simmons. You'll see he'll probably go there. Yep, 28. It's unfortunate, but he's a good player. Now, at this point, I think I know who we're taking. Okay, so going back to my big board. One guy I didn't talk about. So we've got all these guys off. Scourton's gone. Ibuga, Morrison, and Burden are all gone. Wyatt Milam, or it's Milliam. I'll have to check his pronunciation because I think that's a weird one. But this is a guy who's been overlooked this year. He's starting to get noticed. And shout out to Jay for mentioning him to me in summer scouting. You got him on my radar. Look at how damn good this guy is. Just PFF grades, right? And the film backs this up too. Just playing phenomenal football for West Virginia. And the other thing I think of as well, you go back to last year and you look at the best prospect that came out of West Virginia. It was center Zach Frazier. And Zach Frazier was one of the first guys this year from the rookie class that was just playing lights out for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Although I believe he got hurt, which we'll actually double check this really quick. We got plenty of time. But phenomenal start to the year for the last West Virginia guy to come out. Yeah, you see really good grades, really good run blocking, good pass blocking, had one off game against Denver, but good stuff. Didn't allow a sack in all these games. And hasn't played since week 6. But good football player, right? And I think it would be the same case for Milam. And if he's available here, we'll call him Wyatt, just so I don't get this pronunciation wrong. If Wyatt's available around the end of the first round, and that's your top guy, if Simmons is gone, and he should be, and you haven't got a tackle, this is a brain-dead pick for me. As in the sense that I don't have to even think about this. Now, other guys, if we were considering other players, Tyler Booker would be a really obvious player to consider too. Be another offensive lineman you could go after. I think that Wyatt is at a more important position, though, on the offensive line. I think he's also a more refined player at this point. Maybe even safer, arguably. He's the one guy who would be really close for me. And then you could talk a little bit about JT Tuimoloau. But I don't think I would be able to take him over Wyatt in this case. I think Wyatt should be a top half of the first round kind of guy. So we're going to make the easy pick here. We're going to save tackle. We're going to have our awesome cornerback from the first round. And we fixed 2 huge needs on this team. So you feel pretty good about that. So we'll see who's here at 69. I know who I usually would target. I'm sure they'll go off the board. And they actually haven't. So I'll throw out this name first. Travion Henderson. If Travis Etienne is gone for Jacksonville, Henderson is going to be a very obvious candidate for the Jaguars. You get a guy that is, 1, ridiculously fast. 2, he's a pretty good pass catcher. Technically, there's more you can get there, but he shows a lot of upside. 3, he's a really good pass protector. Guy who's going to bring it every play. And as well, a lot of upside with him. It's a player that his freshman year looked like he was going to easily be RB1 when he declared. He suffered some injuries that's going to push him down the board. But hey, as Trent Baalke would say, that's value. Although he won't be making this pick, we cross our fingers at least hoping that. Other guys to consider, man, Evan Stewart, that might be the way we go. That's another player I'm looking at. He's a guy that I liked a lot this year. He's broken out recently. Has some huge games for Oregon. He's a phenomenal route runner. Reminds me a little bit of Jaden Reed when I watch him. And he's shown a little bit more of that physicality this year. I think he could be a really good wide receiver. I think he's definitely someone that we're watching. I think Cornelius is another player that would be really good if we want to just bring in more tackle depth. But obviously, you got Wyatt. You already drafted Javon Foster last year. Probably not the way we'll go. The other guy that I'll throw out here, Kyle Monangai. It's another running back I'm a big fan of. If he's sitting there on day 3 at really any of our picks, I'd be an advocate for him. I just think he's going to be a really good back. He's the heir apparent to Isaiah Pacheco out of Rutgers. So I think something good is going to come out of that. And he's just, you watch him on the field, he's a bowling ball. Or we'll call him a pinball. He just bounces off people. He stays up. He extends plays. He's everything you want. So at this point, you got Henderson and you got Evan Stewart. The way this simulator would work, if I wanted to game it, I would take Henderson and then Stewart probably wouldn't go off because, you know, he's ranked closer to 90 than Henderson. But that's not really what we're doing here, right? We're not here to trick the sim. We're here to take the best player. And to me, while I really like Henderson, the value of what's going to be a committee back, because he's not going to play every snap. You're going to have Tank Bigsby here as well, against a receiver that, you know, maybe he doesn't play a ton the first year. I mean, I guess he could start in the slot, but I see him more as like a Z, a move kind of guy. Evan Stewart, I think, just brings a lot more. I think you could get a really good starter out of him. And so just for that reason, he's going to be the player that I bring in. He's a former 5-star as well, just something to note. Someone with a lot of potential. Someone I think is going to be really good in the NFL, or at least I hope so. That'll be our pick here. Now, we'll see what falls. Obviously, Henderson went off. Not surprised by that. Monangai's gone as well. So, 2 of our running back selections go at that point. Other guys available. We talked about Cornelius. Turner's another guy I like. He's not had a great year, but I think he'd be a good value at this point. Keon Sabb started off really hot this year. Hasn't played as well recently. His grade's gone down a bit. But if you want a safety, I think he could be a good value, although I think he could return. I know a lot of people like Trey Harris. Obviously, we got our wide receiver. But Harris is someone that I think is the easy kind of slam dunk pick, getting a guy that is just going to be better than where you took him. So I could absolutely get that. There are some players here that I have not watched, I'll be honest. I have not got him ads on my list. Derek Harmon is one of those. As you can see, he's having a pretty good year, at least according to PFF. And what did I see there? Is a 91.4% true pass set pass rush grade. That's pretty good stuff. Other guys available, Trevor Etienne, although he's probably not going to be playing with his brother at this point if he's coming to Jacksonville. But this is kind of what you got here, right? For your top guys, people you're considering at this point, you could throw out Nicholas Singleton. He's had a really good year. He's been a much better rusher. The main thing with him was vision that I saw, and he has gotten better with that this year. So that could be a running back option. But I think this is just a position that you can wait on a little bit. Walter Nolan is another guy I throw out. He's having a phenomenal year, been a really good run defender on the interior, playing good football for Ole Miss. Someone who probably needs to be a lot higher on this list. So for me, looking back through the options here, honestly, I gotta find his name again. I was just on it. Where is Walter Nolan? That's gonna be our pick here. Here he is. We're gonna take Walter Nolan. Right now I have an early second grade on him. He's not crazy high on my board. I imagine he might sneak his way into the first. He's a really good player. Someone who's breaking out this year. Someone who has a lot of upside. I think would be a nice addition to this defensive line. I'm not afraid of adding more to it. That's all right. I think we could get better against the run anyway, and that's where he's been really good. So, ain't going to complain about that. We're going to take Walter Nolan with pick 90. That's going to be our last selection here. So, we'll talk back through this, and then we'll wrap it up there. But this is our early look at things. We got Will Johnson in the first round. It was between him and Abdul Carter. As I said, Abdul Carter would be my pick, but I think Will Johnson would probably be more likely, and I'm not going to just put the same guy down every time. So we went with Johnson here. We took Wyatt Milam at 37. That's a phenomenal value. I don't care what their grade is. It's a really good player to get there. So lockdown tackle, get a guy who's going to be physical as well. I think that's something this team is absolutely missing. Evan Stewart, be a wide receiver of the future for this team. Comes into a good situation, doesn't have to be the number one guy, has a good room around him, can develop even behind Gabe Davis if they want to sit him for a year, and eventually can take over, save you some money there. Now you got Brian Thomas Jr., Evan Stewart, and then whoever you're manning in the slot. And then Walter Nolan, just getting a good football player, getting a guy who falls, going to be an impact on this defensive line. So that's what we got here. Overall, I'd be happy with this haul. But a lot of things are going to change, right? We're talking about this stuff in October. We are technically 6 months, actually less than 6 months away from the draft at this point, but that's a long time. We got to get through 2 more months of football. We got to get through the Senior Bowl, the Combine, the random players getting arrested in the month before the draft that always seems to come up. But a lot's going to change, right? And so this is your early look. It'll be fun to look back on this. I always enjoy doing that. Doing it last year, seeing Graham Barden getting taken in my bye-week mock draft. Obviously, didn't come to Jacksonville, but, kind of fun to see how this all ends up. So that's all I've got for you guys today. Do want to shout out our channel members. Thank you to Premier Nasir 904, Mr. Dolphin, and Scrubber Ducky 500, all for joining the channel. If you guys are interested in doing that, you can message me about it. You can see the information here. Be more than happy to help out with it. But appreciate you all for watching. So that's all I've got. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Let me know what you would have done, where you have players ranked, things you disagree on. That's all fine. We're just here to give opinions and to at least try to inform you and have some fun talk about the Jags. So that's what I've got. Hope you all have a great rest of your day. And finally, go Jags.